And I recognize the gentlelady from Michigan for 5 minutes, Ms. Dingell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is always a interesting time for me because many of you know how hard my husband, John Dingell, worked on NEPA. He was the lead author, and he believed in it. He believed in it because he was a conservationist and a hunter, and I still believe today continues to be one of our nation's strongest tools in ensuring communities across the country have meaningful input on major federal actions. NEPA's directive is clear. The government must consider how a project will affect the environment, and the communities and the people affected by the projects have the right to have a fair chance to weigh in on its merits. Included in that is the consideration of environmental justice, climate change, and the full range of impacts. And as our nation continues to face a worsening climate crisis, it's imperative the voices of the communities that are impacted are heard. And that's why I have concerns that some of the bills we're considering today weaken our nation's longstanding environmental laws like NEPA and undermines communities' roles in decision-making. We do care. I do want people to be able to have heat in the winter. I want them to be able to have air conditioning in the summer. I care deeply about keeping manufacturing leadership in this country, but I care about kids' asthma. I care about the floods we're getting in the Midwest. I care about increased hurricanes, and I care about increased wildfires as well. I think there's a misconception here that we need to choose between protecting bedrock environmental laws or accelerating clean energy permitting. We can and we must do both. Unfortunately, the draft resolution in front of us today not only weakens, but it adds strict limitations on judicial review, including shortening the statute of limitations from 6 years to 4 months. And one of the points that worries me the most is whoever is filing the lawsuit needs to have filed a public comment during the comment period on the exact issue being sued over. And if you all had lived through the town hall meetings and the angry citizens I have in the last 2 weeks because a site that was approved and not one community spoke during the public comment period, but Manhattan Nuclear Waste is headed for them, you wouldn't want to tell them they didn't have a right to do an injunction or talk about this because I have yelled at them all. That's what public comment periods are for, but I'm not telling them that they don't have any rights. So having said that, Mr. Beard, how would this restriction impact those in your community? Are you always able to file public comments on every agency action? What barrier does that restriction pose?
The restrictions posed that are proposed in that bill would make it much more difficult for communities like mine to have public engagement. Why? Because people have lives that they have to carry out and live on. As we speak right now, there are those in East Texas as well as Southwest Louisiana under threat of Hurricane Francine. And the problem with that is that there were meetings being carried on during that time that it took efforts by the community to get them postponed because otherwise the government was going to continue. So by having that situation, as you mentioned, it doesn't give us the equity of access, and it also doesn't deal with language justice. And those are things that are critical in those communities because they are for and about the people.
Thank you. Mr. Beard, can you tell us why consideration of climate change through the NEPA process is so important?
It's so important for just what I said regarding Francine. These are more powerful, stronger storms than hurricanes. Louisiana's been hit by 6 in the past 5 years, and in the past 17, Port Arthur's been hit by 5 or 6 also. And so without considering the weather and those impacts, we're not seeing what's going to adversely hurt people because those poor and under-marginalized or marginalized communities have the most burden to bear. They get the least help and support, and they are hurt the most because those are poor communities.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, as I've made clear many, many times, I remain open to working with Republicans. I think it's critical on bipartisan permitting reform efforts, but we got to do it in a way that ensures we protect our climate, our environment, and our nation's frontline communities. Thank you, and I yield back.
And Ms. Dingell, I appreciate that offer, and that's why we're having this hearing on a discussion draft to figure out how to work together in a bipartisan manner. I now recognize the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Graves, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I just noticed my good friend's poster back there, Project 2025, and I was talking to some folks in the team. Apparently, he linked that poster